everybody, and welcome back to another video on my channel. It is Kevin here, or Minis by Kev, or Kev, or whatever you want to call me. In last week's video, we started on the Swan, which is somewhere. Swan boat. This is part of a diorama I'm doing, just like a little diorama about a little abandoned tunnel of love. And if you want to watch this video, go ahead and link it above. You can go ahead and watch it. But this week, we're going to actually start on the diorama. I don't know how big this is going to be. I made this little mock-up, which you can kind of see. I just taped together some like old food packaging so I could just make this mock-up. I think I want it to be a little bit bigger than this. My original plan was to do a 12 by 12 inch diorama, and then it was going to just stick out as far as I needed it. But I think that this it's not encapsulating the whole heart, and I think I want the whole heart in there, like the whole tunnel heart. This inside part is the max size of the boat, and then the bigger outside black line is going to be the actual size of the tunnel. The heart is like the frame of the tunnel. I got a lot of things that I need to build for this. I'm a little nervous. I don't know really what I'm doing, but you know, I can't get it done if I don't start. So let's go ahead and turn on the camera. We'll get started on this and I will start building. First and foremost, I want to apologize for the lighting in this video. If you've watched my previous videos, you may have seen that I had an light. However, it just randomly stopped working in the middle of me working on a project. So the lighting in this video isn't the greatest for about half of it, but luckily my best friend for my birthday bought me a new one. And for some reason, I had an light model that you could not replace the bulb in, which I didn't even know was a thing. But my new one, I can. So if it ever goes out again, I'll be able to replace it. Now going on to the diorama, I measured this out to be a size that would fit an acrylic box I saw on Amazon because I wanted to be able to display this when I was done and have it covered. So I just measured that out and then cut it out to fit that exact size, and I wanted to make sure it would fit the boat. And then I cut out the first little inlet, as you can see here, where the boat would go through the tunnel if this was actually real. I'm trying to show you here, although I'm not sure how successful I am, that I wanted these 1, 2, 3 blocks to hold up the back wall of the diorama against the bottom one in a perfect L shape. I was a little worried about, warping once I paint it later, but I at least wanted to start on my strongest foot forward. You can see in the back where I have the 1, 2, 3 block holding it up, but I also decided to make these little brackets that would help hold it at an exact L shape. These brackets will be hidden once I put in the faux entry to the tunnel, because I am doing about an inch and a half little entryway, so that way I could make it look like it actually goes somewhere once you go through the tunnel. But these little L brackets will help hold it up and hold it in shape. Again, the warping might be an issue later, but that's something for future me to figure out. What you're seeing on camera here is I wanted to make a little bit of deck on each side of the actual channel where the water will be, which is where the swan boat will be sinking. To make the deck, I needed to kind of build it out so that way, I could build on top of something. And what you're seeing here is me actually just cutting out these pieces and making sure that they fit in the exact dimensions of the bottom of the diorama, because again, it is cut exactly to fit inside of an acrylic box with a little bit of wiggle room just in case I ended up messing up a little bit. After completing the tops of both decks, I needed to make the sides so that way it was slightly raised. The raising is because I do want to put a little bit of resin in this in the future, and I need it to look like this is the channel where the water would be, which is the resin, and the boat needs to be sunken down from the deck. So I needed to raise up the deck a little bit, and I think I did it about an inch. I cut out all the pieces, and then I used a lot of glue and precision to try and get the thing to be straight. I used 1, 2, 3 blocks, I used rulers. I just knew that I wanted it to fit really perfectly on the diorama base I was making. Again, for the acrylic box, but also because I wanted this to look nice. I mean, it's going to be abandoned, but I wanted it to look good, and so I took a long time. I took a lot of measuring things, going back and forth, just making sure it was going to look right in the end. And here I am just building it, and I added these little brackets on the inside to make sure that these were just like scrap pieces of mat board that still had a perfect 90-degree angle, so that way I could use these to hold up the walls at a perfect angle. Again, I was being very, very meticulous about this. I normally am not this meticulous, but I just really wanted it to line up. I really wanted it to look good in the end. Well, good to be aged. After I was sure that these boxes were going to hold up, I went ahead and glued each one down, and just to save you the misery of having to sit through all that again, I did a little bit of Food Network magic and I made the other one off screen. And here it is. So I just got to the shower, so it's probably not the best time to be recording, but I want to get working on this, so I need to record a clip at some point. We are to the point in the stage where the part where you load in on the swan boat is done and the construction of the back is mostly done. I also went ahead and made this part, which is going to slide right in here once it's done. There's a barely enough room. I'll have to kind of force it in. I might actually have to bend it a little bit, but it's mat board, so it'll be fine. But this is gonna slide in here, and this will be where the boat's coming out. Where at this point, I decided not to attach this yet because I think that it'll be easier to work on this when it's not attached, and then I can just attach it when it's finished. So that's where we're at. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on the camera, and we're gonna keep working on this and hopefully get it done soon. Next, I wanted to make the heart shape that was gonna go on the background. My worry with this is that the original template that I made is actually smaller than what the overall diorama ended up being, so I knew that I couldn't actually follow it entirely, but I did want to try and use the template because I actually liked the heart shape that's on it. But in the end, this doesn't actually end up working. I end up cutting it out on my Cricut because the Cricut can do a really good, perfect heart shape. So I just went ahead and used my Cricut to cut it out. However, I left this in because I wanted to just show that sometimes you try things out and they just don't work out and you have to pivot. It's a little difficult to see here because it is white paper on top of white mat board, but if you look really closely, you can see that there's the heart shape opening, and that was again cut on my Cricut, and then I used washi tape there towards the top, which is that little black strip, just to hold it down so that way when I was outlining the shape on the mat board, it wouldn't move. And I just only cut out on one sheet, and then I flipped it over and cut it out so that way both sides would be exact. You can see here in the back I used washi tape to hold down the other half of the heart, and I only did that so that way when I was putting glue on this half and I was putting it on the background, I could make sure that they lined up because I was a little nervous that they'd be like a little wonky looking. So I just need something to hold the other one in place, and I needed the 1, 2, 3 blocks on the edge to line them up with the edge of the back of the diorama. Or the background. The back piece? The entrance to the back? The piece that's on the work table. I knew I wanted the heart to be red on this thing, but I did not know what color to make the actual like background entrance area. And so I went with this sky blue color, mostly because of Hey Arnold and that scene where they go to the Tunnel of Love, it's sky blue. But I also showed the colors here because if you've watched my previous videos, you know that I have run into in the past where I forgot what color I used and I had to start over. So just showing them here for future me in case I need to touch it up or something. Once I chose the 2 colors I was using, I then proceeded to do about 8,000 or so coats of paint on the back of this because I used double thick mat board for the heart shape, and it has almost like a plasticky material on it, almost like foam board, but it is mat board, I guess. I don't know. It's called mat board on where I bought it. And so I had to do about 8,001 maybe coats of really thin paint on this thing to really get it to stick. And I am a little nervous that over time it may come off a little bit because I did not prime it or anything, and I know that paint doesn't stick to plastic, and the more I'm talking about this, the more nervous I'm getting. So let's move on, and I painted the red heart, and then I painted the blue background. Because the heart is the double thick mat board, there was the white border that I wanted to cover up. So what I did off screen is I painted a piece of cardstock the same color, red, as the heart, and then I cut out into strips that were supposed to be the same size, the same thickness as the heart, but they are a little bit bigger, but I actually don't mind the way they look. I think it almost looks intentional, even though it wasn't, but you know. Sometimes you have happy accidents. And so I showed you where I was going to be putting these paper strips, and then I just went ahead and glued them in. After they were in, I did have to go back over them with some paint because then there was the white edges of the paper, but that was easier for me to cover up than trying to paint the white edge on the heart since it was so close to the blue. And unfortunately, I couldn't just paint the double thick mat board originally because it does have a texture to it, and if I had painted it, you would have seen the holes, and it almost looks like Swiss cheese that's been poked a bunch or something. So to have it look smooth, this is the route that I had to go. I'm going to be putting in a curtain that goes into the actual tunnel, but I wanted the viewer, if they were looking at this and they could see through the curtain a little bit, because it is going to be old and, you know, torn up, disheveled, aged. I wanted it to look like it was dark inside, so I needed to put this down so I knew where to paint the black color. And I know I could have just painted the whole thing on the inside, which I might still end up doing. I do paint a majority of it anyway, but I was trying to, one, save paint, even though it's cheap paint. I mean, it's good not to waste, right? But also, I just wanted to make sure that what you could see would definitely be painted. And I also wanted to try and avoid warping, but as you can see here, I did turn it around because I needed to paint the back because it was starting to warp noticeably. So I knew that if I painted the other side, it would help mitigate as much warp as possible. It didn't get rid of it completely, but it does help. Warping was not something I took into account when I was working on the heart and the blue part. And as you can see from this, it did warp quite badly. Also, here, new light. Don't we love it? It looks so much better than that warm white that was giving off weird colors. It looks so much better. Anyway, like I was saying, the warping was quite bad, so I did have to do a couple layers of black paint on this side, even though you're not gonna see it like at all. But I was trying to warp it back the other direction. And I do think that when I add it onto the diorama permanently, I am gonna have to do a little finagling of trying to bend it back in place before the glue sets. I'm at a crossroads on this project where I don't know what to work on next because I think that I need to start doing these things right here. And I think that that's gonna be, because eventually I'm gonna do resin in the middle channel, right? Like this is where the water's gonna be. I don't know what color to make this bottom part. I know these are gonna be wood, but I don't know what to do with these. And I still have the curtains to do in the back. But I don't know, because the resin's gonna be like slightly tinted, like a greenish kind of color I'm thinking, so to make it look like old and murky. But like what color should this be at the bottom then? I don't know. And these are gonna be wood, but like do I put those in now? Like what's gonna get damaged when I end up doing the resin stuff later? I don't know. So I guess I just gotta figure it out. In the end, I decided to paint the bottom of the water portion the light blue as well, because when I was looking at some old Tunnel of Love pictures online, it looked like they make them blue so that way when the water's in it, I think it's supposed to make it look deeper. I'm not entirely sure. And the channel's not going to be completely full of resin / water because it's supposed to be old, so it's supposed to be just like leftover water. It's not supposed to be well maintained or anything, so it's going to be just like the dregs of the water, the leftover, the spittle of the water. That's why it's going to be tinged slightly green. It's going to have stuff floating in it. You'll see all that in the next video. But something I want to bring up here is, again, warping. Warping is such a huge issue when it comes to mat board when you're painting it. Be very careful. I had to put the 1, 2, 3 block down, and I kept having to move it so I could paint around it, but also to try and mitigate the warp. Luckily for this portion, the 1, 2, 3 block did weigh it down enough that in the end, it's not warped. So if you were painting something that's flat on the surface at least, use something heavy to keep it down. Fortunately, that wasn't really an option when I was working on the back black portion, but warping is a huge issue. Just be very careful. Off camera, I went ahead and painted the outside portions of the deck black just because that's going to be the outside of the diorama. And anything that's facing outside that's not actually part of the diorama is going to be painted black. So the very back of it, is going to be black, as well as the sides of the deck and the front of the deck are all going to be black, because in my mind, those are like internal portions that you wouldn't normally see anyway. So I kind of wanted to paint them black to like cut them off from reality, if that makes sense. After that came the very, very long and tedious process of gluing on the decks for both sides, the wood. I am a little worried that when I do the resin, this will get damaged because I do have to add in a piece of mat board to keep the resin from leaking out and running out when I'm pouring it. And I did some testing and I know that 2 mat boards hot glued together will keep resin out. However, it will damage the mat board a little bit on the diorama. Now, as long as I'm careful and I don't get it on the wood portion, it should be fine, but that is going to be an issue for next video when I actually get to the resin pouring. Here, it was just lots and lots and lots of laying down this wood to make this deck. And I watched 2 movies while doing this. It took a very long time to cut these pieces out. I like doing wood floorings out of popsicle sticks. I think it makes them look really nice, but man, is it tedious. I wanted to get down a base color for the wooden deck portion. I didn't really want to finish it because I knew that I was going to have to rough it up later. And in fact, later I may rip up some of the boards. I may make it look like it's falling like inward, it's falling apart because it is going to be aged and it's supposed to be an old deck. However, I didn't want to start off with the raw popsicle sticks at that point because I wanted it to have like, this is the color it originally was, so I could work with that. Because when I'm aging something, I like to make it look how it was supposed to look and then age it, which I don't know if is effective. It honestly could be making it more difficult for me. So really, if you have a good way of aging things, let me know below. Do you start from the very beginning making it look old? Do you just jump right into that? Do you make it look perfect first and then age it? I don't know. I just would appreciate any kind of tips that you may have. I wanted to figure out where the lights were going to go on the heart because I do want to have this light up. I'm not sure if I'm going to end up using all these in the end, but I just needed a rough placement of where they would be when I was making it. As you can see here, I'm counting them and I just wanted them to be evenly spaced as possible. I tried to measure it out to make them like the perfect distance between each other, but honestly, because it's at an angle, it was really difficult to make them perfect. So I just kind of eyeballed it and I figured unless you go in with a ruler, you're not gonna be able to tell that they're not perfectly lined up. Because I wanted these to look like old light bulbs and not just clear little glass domes, I knew I needed to paint them. I didn't want you to be able to see the fairy light that's going to be inside of each one that lights it up, and so that was another reason why I chose to paint it. However, again, I didn't use any kind of gesso, or I'm not even sure if gesso works on glass to be honest, but I didn't use any kind of primer. So similar to the heart, actually worse than the heart, I had to do about 9,000 coats of paint on this one. I mean, the amount of paint on each one of these bulbs is astronomical, and with glass, if you've never tried it to paint on it before, sometimes when you try to paint another coat, it wipes off the last coat and it will, even if it's dry. And so it was kind of a nightmare. And they do look a little like kind of splotchy and rough, But I actually like that because it's meant to be an old abandoned Tunnel of Love. And these things, I don't even know if they're around anymore. I don't think they are. And so it makes sense that these light bulbs would look really old because they're going on a really old ride. To me, these are just old light bulbs on an old ride from like 60 years ago or something. And a fun side effect of painting these is that when they are painted, they make this fun little noise when you roll them around in your hand. Once they were all painted and I decided where they were going on the diorama, I had to take them off one by one and mark it where I wanted to put the hole for the fairy light. After I had marked all the point of entries for the fairy lights to come through to the front, I had to take my hand drill and drill through this, and let me tell you, it was very difficult. This is why I think that maybe my process of making something look perfect before aging it is maybe not the best, because I always feel bad. Like, I want to age it, but it looks so nice. I made it so nice, and so maybe my way of doing things isn't that great. But in this case, I don't think there's a way around this. I needed to drill through all the layers to get the fairy light to be able to fit through the back. I recorded the entire process of adding the fairy lights through the back of it. However, I don't have a top-down camera because I just don't have the funds to buy a top-down mount. So I didn't get all of it on camera. So I did get a majority of it though. Basically what I did is I have this electrical tape that I've just had around my house for a while. And I don't actually know how hot fairy lights get, but I figured if there was any kind of warmth giving off them, the best thing to use is this electrical tape. Now, I also decided to use the electrical tape because if this ever burns out, if the fairy lights ever go out, I'm going to make a hatch on the back of the diorama so I can open it up and replace the fairy lights. My big worry with this is that the fairy lights may burn out eventually and then they just be stuck in there if I glued them. So that's another reason why I used the electrical tape. So luckily I had just enough fairy lights. There was like 2 or 3 extra, but there was actually parts where I needed to coil them and skip over one, which I have taped over so that way the light doesn't emanate from the entryway of it. And I had just enough to get through. I think there was maybe like 2 or 3 extra lights. And I just snaked it along, taped it as I went, and stuck it through the holes that I had just drilled through. Even though it's not done yet, obviously, I wanted to see what it would look like lit up. I painstakingly put all these bulbs back on, but did not glue them yet because it's not final, just so I could see what it would look like when it was lit up. When I was done, I turned it on, realized you couldn't see it, so I tried turning off my aught light. Still couldn't see it, so I turned off the overhead light, and this is what it looks like. There are some different settings that will make it twinkle or flash, but to be honest, I know it seems simple. I'm just glad it works. I think it looks really great, and to be honest, I'm just really happy with it. Hello, and welcome to the end of this video. Here's what we're at. Here's what I will say about this. The lights are very touchy. I do like these because... Did it just die on me right as I was making this video? Well, that's how I feel about these lights. There we go. So as you can see, they're a little touchy. They turn on by themselves just by moving this. They turn off by themselves. But if they're flat on a table, they don't have this issue really. I can set it down, and if I don't touch it, it's good. So I think these lights are gonna work. I don't wanna redo them, and I love that they are battery operated. I mean, battery and remote operated. I don't have to plug them in because when I put them in the acrylic case, I don't want to have to open it to turn it on. If I wanna show somebody, I wanna be like, look, oh, lights, oh look, it just turned on by itself. So that's the one downside of these. These are very touchy. I know it's this battery casing because the battery casing is very bad. Like, you can hear it rattling around in there, so I'm gonna have to also place it inside the diorama at a very specific position. So the battery's always touching, but it can be turned on and off when I want it to. That's the one downside of these. Otherwise though, the remote is very nice. And you can use one remote for multiple strands because it comes with like, I think like 8 strands and like 2 remotes. So you do get quite a bit of versatility with these. This is where I'm at though. This is where we're ending. I wish that I realized after while recording this video, doing the editing, that this took me so much longer than I was expecting. And it's honestly, I should have broke this up into multiple videos along the way. I have learned that lesson for the future. So hopefully it won't take me this long to come out with another video because this took forever, it feels like forever. And I can't keep spending a month on one diorama. I just need to break it up because I like making videos and I want to upload videos, so I want, you know, I just need to break it up more. Overall though, I'm very happy with it. I really need to set it down so that way it stops turning on. I also forgot to mention I haven't put the bulbs on permanently yet because I'm going to maybe smash some of them. So that's why the bulbs aren't on currently. Anyway, if you have any ideas for aging, I think I know what I'm gonna do, but I'd always love to hear them. Comment below, let me know. Yeah, that's really it. So if you like me or you like miniatures, make sure you hit that subscribe button below and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.